We all know that comparing yourself to others is not a healthy way to go about your goals and dreams. It just makes you feel less than, it makes you feel unworthy and sometimes even resentful of this other person, whether you know them or not. And I know from my own experience, it's so hard to get out of this comparison cycle. Before we dive into the tips and strategies, I want to go over the words envy and jealousy because they have a different meaning. Envy is the feeling that we get when we see someone else having something or achieving something that we want to have or achieve as well. Jealousy, on the other hand, is that feeling of being threatened by, being protective, being fearful to lose something to another person, to lose a position to another person. It's almost like a rivalry. By the way, if you're new here, my name is Miri. My channel is all about personal growth, development, and spirituality. So the first step in order to get out of the envy, get out of the comparison mode, is to get to the root cause, which is often limiting beliefs. I grew up with a lot of limiting beliefs, as I'm sure many of us have, and I was always told that if somebody else's life is easier, it's because they had an unfair advantage. It's easy for them, but it's hard for us. And then it gets you in the spiral of being really resentful to this other person, even though you might not want that feeling. That just makes you feel less, makes you feel unworthy, and that's just not true. Most of our limiting beliefs come from childhood, whether it was your parents or caregivers or just people that were around you, and it's almost like they planted the seeds in you. And as a kid, you don't question those limiting beliefs. It's just what you think is the truth. But the limiting belief is a truth that you chose to believe at some point because you needed it to survive. Once we get older, we don't question those limiting beliefs anymore, right? If you have the thought or the limiting belief that I'm never going to be good enough, life is hard, or I'm not worthy of achieving this goal, you're not really questioning what lies behind it. What is the barriers and the layers beyond that? Where does this limiting belief come from? So a lot of the times when we try to figure out a way to get away from this comparison mode, we have to dig a little deeper. You gotta dig a little deeper. Find out who you are. And just see what's underneath there. A way to question your limiting beliefs, I've said this in multiple videos, but it's so important because everything that we want to change on the outside has to happen on the inside first. And if you know your limiting beliefs, to find evidence against that limiting belief, why it is possible for you. Find other people that have achieved something like that, and then it'll be easier to have that evidence, and your brain can just be a little bit more at ease. If you're having trouble with negative self-talk and being jealous and envy of other people, watch until the end because I'm going to share some powerful affirmations. And we also have to be really self-aware, because sometimes when we are in this comparison cycle, a lot of it is self-pity. And I think just being honest with yourself that, okay, you see something that somebody else has, or it seems unfair, it's always easier to go into self-pity and be like, yeah, life's just hard, it's just the way it is, it's unfair. But being aware that you're pitying yourself in that moment can really be a game changer. And the truth is that we often don't see what's behind other people's successes. With social media, we know people share their highlights, right? And it always seems that they got it so easy, but nobody really questions it, how much it took, how much sacrifice it took, how much work it took to get there. And I think if you can be aware of that fact, of thinking about something that you've achieved in your life that you're really proud of, where other people might have told you, oh, you got there so fast, and you're like, hold up, that actually took a lot of work. So just seeing that and always asking the question, I wonder what it took them to get there. I wonder what action steps they took to get there. I wonder how long it took for them to get there. If you're envious of your peers or even your friends, sometimes that can happen. We don't even want to talk about it. It's just like buried underneath. But get curious. What would happen if that friend of yours that achieved a big goal, what if you would go to them and ask them how they got there? And then it switches your perspective to, oh, in my mind, I made it sound like it was so easy for them, but it actually wasn't, because they just told me that it took a lot of work, it took years, it took months. And if your comparison is related to a dream, maybe being open to them if you feel safe and saying, hey, I admire what you're doing. It's so cool to see you going for your dreams and achieving all of that. Actually, I have the same dream. Would you have a piece of advice for me how I could get closer to my dream? And I feel just being open and vulnerable is often an understated superpower. Vulnerability is so important. We often feel alone, and once you open up, people will tell you like, oh, that's how I felt too. It might be a no-brainer, but I wanted to include it in this list, and that is limit your time on social media. I made it a habit to mute people if I don't want to unfollow them, or I unfollow them, because if you choose to spend time on social media, it should be something that gets you inspired and hyped and in the right direction of taking action, and not making you feel like shit. Talking about taking action, because that's where all the comparison, overthinking, the envy would stop right away. What would happen if you set a goal and then you take one step closer to that? If it's a financial goal, what can you do right now to maybe save a little bit more money? Maybe just set up a high yield savings account, or write down your expenses so you have a better overview. There's always somewhere where we can take action towards our goals and dreams. And taking action often, and I feel like almost always, takes the thought of other people and focuses back onto you, because then you have something to do. You have a goal in mind, you know that this is the direction you want to go, and then you can work towards that, even if it's just a tiny little step. What's your favorite flavor of shit sandwich? If you read the book Big Magic by Elizabeth Gilbert, you might have heard about the term shit sandwich. She interviews somebody and that person says, no matter your dream job or your goal or what you want to achieve, everything sucks from time to time. You just have to decide what sort of suckage you're willing to deal with. So the question is not so much, what are you passionate about? The question is, what are you passionate enough about that you can endure the most disagreeable aspect of the work? If you want to be a professional artist, but you aren't willing to see your work rejected hundreds, if not thousands of times, then you're done before you start. And then he says, because if you love and want something enough, whatever it is, then you don't really mind eating the shit sandwich that comes with it. The most important part of all is to focus on your own journey. If we compare ourselves to others, as I said before, the focus is always on the other people, what they have, what we don't have, what they achieved, what we didn't achieve. Being aware that you are amazing the way you are, that you are worthy the way you are, there's nothing you need to change, and that you've achieved some great things in your past. And if you have trouble celebrating your wins, and I know it can be a little tricky, I would always suggest to write down your successes, whether that's daily wins, monthly wins, yearly wins, quarterly wins, whatever you want to do. Grab a piece of paper, grab a journal, and really write down what you've achieved. I do this daily in my Higher Self, Future Self journal. You can grab it for free, it's linked below. But once you see daily wins, once you reflect on your month, once you reflect over the past year, I promise you there are things that you've achieved too. And the thing is, once we see something that we have achieved, we can focus more on things that we want because we see it as a win. It's like a little tick. It's like, yes, we did it. And then it gives us the boost to keep going, to go after the next step. I am a gift to this world. I am a gift to this world. I celebrate wins of others. I celebrate wins of others. I acknowledge my own power. I acknowledge my own power. I am unique and don't need to compare myself to others. I am unique and don't need to compare myself to others. Thank you so much for watching. Go and be your favorite self. I'll see you soon.